I'm Dan Snow. Welcome to Voices of the First World War. In the years leading up to the centenary of the war, the last of those who actually experienced it have passed away. But the Imperial War Museums and the BBC had recorded interviews with many veterans to try to capture what it was like to actually be there. This series listens to those stories. I'm passionate about naval history, and when it comes to the First World War, the sea, the navy, and the men who served afloat are often forgotten. The Western Front and the trenches can loom so large that they eclipse other vital aspects of the war. Scapa Flow in the Orkney Islands became the Royal Navy's main base. A stunning natural harbour, it allowed a fleet to control the exit from the North Sea to the rest of the world. Germany had the second best fleet on the planet, so Britain would blockade it, stop it going anywhere or doing anything.
Admiral Sir Charles Madden, he had everybody brought up, and he had with him, I always remember it, a case.
William Audacious had been in the Royal Navy for 3 years when war was declared.
And in that case was a white suit with blood all over it. He said, "Ship company, this is war, not what we were doing playing around." He said, "This is war." He said, "I was wearing this when several men was killed." He was a nice admiral, he was a good man.
Across the North Sea, the Germans waited for the British to come and try to crush them, as Nelson had done at Trafalgar. Lieutenant Commander Dane served aboard the German battleship Nassau.
The firm knowledge that the British fleet was vastly superior to the German fleet didn't affect our morale at all. On the contrary, everybody, from the admiral down to the youngest stoker, was anxious to show what he had learned, and everybody was agreed that the fleet as a whole and every unit in it would give a very good account of themselves when the day would come. On the first day, the evening of the declaration of war, when we were lying outside the naval base of Wilhelmshaven, one of the younger officers said to us, well, there's no doubt all of us will find ourselves back at the bottom of the North Sea before the fortnight has expired, and I have decided that I shall eat nothing but caviar as long as I am alive. Well, he didn't continue very long.
The Heligoland Bight is the name given to the part of the North Sea just outside the Elbe estuary, which runs down to Hamburg. It was here that the navies of both nations first traded blows, and their awesome firepower was revealed.
During this action, I saw what I thought was something for me, marked in my name, a shell coming over. It was a huge shell.
A.J.E. Blackmore was a rangefinder on HMS New Zealand.
I could see through my rangefinder that it was directed straight to us, and watched it, and as it come, it just cleared the top where I was sitting, just cleared the bridge and exploded in the water just the other side of us. A big black brown cloud. And during this conversation, the gunnery lieutenant, he said to me, "What was your feeling when that shell come under the top?" "Oh," I said, "I just clutched my seat and shut my eyes." He says, "First time in action?" I says, "Yes, sir." "Oh," he says, "that accounts for it."
The Colne was the flagship of the German squadron, and it joined the fight, but didn't survive.
She was on fire, and she hauled down her flag. The men started to muster on the quarterdeck of the Colne. During that time, some idiot on the German ship fired at the destroyer that was coming up to rescue them. Beatty on the line saw this and gave orders for a salvo to be fired at her. And he fired a salvo of 13 fires that swiped them right off the earth. It was terrible to see them flying about everywhere. We'd have dropped a torpedo into her and let her put her to finish.
The Mainz and the Ariadne were sunk, as well as the Colne. 1,200 Germans perished in the battle, the Royal Navy lost 35. But both sides were worried by what they'd experienced. As on the Western Front, new technology was rendering old tactics obsolete, and the North Sea also settled into a stalemate. But action continued on the other side of the globe. A small German squadron, led by Admiral Maximilian von Spee on his flagship Scharnhorst, had been cruising in the Pacific when war broke out. In November, they were confronted off Chile in what became known as the Battle of Coronel. Seaman A. Bushkin was on HMS Otranto, an armed merchant cruiser.
I and others like me, merchant seamen, had no training whatever as with regard to naval action or anything like that. Were very, very much worried. And while thinking like that, suddenly there's a shell comes screaming overhead. Rumbling, screaming noise. We turn, Christ, is it going to hit us? What's that? Fortunately it does, it misses us. And then there's shells all around us.
Petty Officer Edward Pullen and an officer, S.G. Pawley, were in action on HMS Glasgow as the Germans concentrated on the British ships Good Hope and Monmouth.
The sea was very rough at the time, and at times washing over us. When we were on the crest of a wave, the shells would hit the crest. And by that time we were in the trough, and the shells would pass over ricochet over like railway trains. We could frequently feel the wind of the shells as they passed over. We could see that the Good Hope and the Monmouth were in great trouble.
And the old man on our ship, he sent a message to the Good Hope. Shall we come in closer, sir? Can we help? More, I think, with the idea of saving life than doing any damage to the Germans, because we couldn't. But Sir Christopher Craddock, the Admiral, he sent back immediately, "No, Otranto, get out of it while the going's good. We don't want to waste any more lives." And there's no doubt, through that man, we all were able to return to our wives and children, etc.
And in 25 minutes, the Good Hope drifted on our port side, all in flames. And a few minutes after, she exploded and both funnels went. Two went one way and two went the other. Our magazines must have blown up, see?
We proceeded to the Monmouth in the darkness and asked if we could do anything. And she informed us that she was making water very fast for it and must get her stern to the sea. And that's the last we heard of the Monmouth.
And then we came round the stern of the Monmouth. 3 shells from the German battle cruisers hit us right in the port quarter.
Their guns, although they were sinking, definitely sinking, their guns were firing, and those men were carrying out their action stations right until the very last.
Over 1,600 British officers and men were lost. It was the most high-profile Royal Naval defeat for over a century. Reinforcements were sent to the South Atlantic. British sailors sought revenge for what had happened at Coronel. It was the Battle of the Falklands.
I shall never forget seeing that ship go down. She sank at about 7:30 after a long chase and a very hard fight.
Engineer Amis recalls HMS Kent chasing the German cruiser Nuremberg.
We all had the impression that those Germans were very, very plucky people. I actually saw one man pull out the flag that was aft, how he got hold of it, and I saw him as he was sinking under the water, still waving that flag as that ship went down, much to say, Deutschland still über alles. As we were going towards Port Stanley early next morning, we had our service of thanksgiving for victory. The parson naturally saw to that, and we were glad. We were full of thanksgiving, I can assure you.
Away from the battleships, there was another war. The merchant navy carried the cargoes on which Britain depended, cargoes which were targeted by lethal new weapons, Unterseeboot, or submarines. Officer Edgar von Spiegel served on these U-boats.
In the submarine, perhaps you were sitting in your small cabin, drinking your morning coffee and ham and eggs, when the whistle or the phone rang and told you, ship in sight. You went back on top of the conning tower, cold-blooded, and you had to press your button, that means firing your torpedo with cold blood. And the results of these damned torpedoes were certainly very often heartbreaking.
The German U-boats were effective, but the German battleships were making less of an impact. Their only chance seemed to be to lure out a few British battleships at a time and ambush them. So the Germans launched raids on Whitby, Scarborough and Hartlepool at the end of 1914, hoping to tempt them out. The raids killed 137 people ashore. Emily Beavis was a small girl. As the gasworks took a direct hit, Hartlepool emptied.
There was prams going. People piled up with Christmas cakes was in evidence more than anything. People as if they'd just got the bedding and rolled it into a bundle and pushed it on the top. Screaming children, wondering where the mothers were. And all of a sudden there was a great big flash in front of my face, and I put my hands up to sort of protect it. And when I looked, I was all blood, my hands, and I'd been hit. My mother, she said, "We're not going home." We dashed out of the road more into the open country. And of course there was lots and lots and lots of people, just like you see them in the Second World War, like a crocodile of people all going the same way, away from the sea.
The shelling of British towns could not be kept secret, even as the victory in the South Atlantic was lauded in the papers. But other things were kept secret.
And when the crew was being selected for the Audacious, I was fortunate enough to be one of them, and I joined her as a wardroom steward.
One of Britain's most powerful battleships, the super dreadnought HMS Audacious, was manoeuvring off the north of Ireland. Steward Charles Pengelly here reads his account of what happened, recorded in 1938 by the BBC.
We were busy on the job, getting along nicely, clearing away the dishes, when all of a sudden, about 20 to 9, there came a terrific crash. The air between decks became thick with black dust, which gave me the impression we had struck a mine. And I fairly got the wind up here. I didn't fancy being left down there between decks without a chance of swimming for it.
It was October the 27th, 1914, and HMS Audacious had hit a mine.
Orders were immediately shouted from the bridge, "All Damon abandon ship." Just when we were about to climb aboard the destroyer, a lookout shouted, "Submarine off the port bow, sir." The destroyer was immediately ordered to go full speed ahead, and she started to move too. But I wasn't going to be left behind in that boat, so I jumped and grasped the destroyer's rail, and I hung there with my feet down in the water. And then I found I couldn't pull myself up. And on looking round, I found the boat I had left was 10 yards away. However, a few moments later, one of the destroyer's crew came along and pulled me inboard. At 9 o'clock, the Audacious rolled over, and with a tremendous explosion which lit up the sky for miles around, she disappeared.
The loss of the mighty Audacious to a humble mine was hushed up. The Audacious stayed on lists of ship activities and movements. Only after the armistice in 1918 did the Admiralty announce the sinking. The fighting had confounded nearly all pre-war predictions. Mines, submarines, aircraft and big, powerful guns meant that war at sea was undergoing a revolution. As on land, new ideas would be needed to break the stalemate.